My name is Maria. Thank you guys so much for coming. Many places online and in real life that you could be on a Wednesday night besides here, so we are very happy that you're here. I am the program assistant and alumni coordinator for the National Student Poets Program, which is run in partnership, which is run by the Alliance for Young Artists and Writers in partnership with the Institute for Museum and Library Services. So each year we honor five teenage poets throughout the country. Each represents a different region, and they basically do readings and engage the community in literary events and a bunch of super cool things throughout the year. And they um, get a lot of support to do a community-based service project, which is sort of the cornerstone of the program. And it's all about like giving back to the community. And there's so many things that they can do. We were talking with the Next Cross right now about what they're going to do. They were thinking about like helping to mitigate effects of climate change in their communities, things like that. Trying to reopen libraries that have been closed. So like it's really like there are so many things they can do. It's super cool. This is my first year working with the program, and I'm really excited to be part of it. And one of the coolest parts of it is getting to know the alums of the program, who are all very, very cool people. And we have a few of them here tonight to read us some lovely poetry of theirs. Um, I don't think I'm missing anything. Feel free to let me know if I am. But yeah, we're just really happy that you're here. So thank you for being here.
Hi, folks. My name is Maya. I'm a class of 2016 National Student Poet. And I just want to echo everything Maria has said. Every cohort is so amazing. And being a National Student Poet has shaped so much of my subsequent poetry career. And so anytime I have an opportunity to engage with the cohort or the community, I love to do so. So I'm going to be reading one of the pieces from my first collection, How to Make an Algorithm in the Microwave, and the poem is called Bronchitis is a Beautiful Name for a Girl. California is kindling again. It's been 6 brush fires, and I'm nobody's daughter, calculating venials on the hood of a Buick. My brother tugs his sleeves and his lungs strain. We scratch the second-hand Commodore's album, and he smiles mundane and lovely, like a grocery list. Nail polish, carabiner, Advil fruit. I'm calling because the city is filled with pollutants, because the duplex with the red roof is falling apart. We argue like tonsils swollen and stubborn. We watch the In-N-Out cashier wash his gloves off in the sink, and my shirt makes they look fertile. We laugh about used biology books, the Disney movie about the dragon boy. We make the sky blue. We split the scrambled wounds in our stomach. I have an aching letter in my mouth the insurance won't cover, but I'm really afflicted with wanting. The smell of pavement after rain. I'm calling because I have no aunts in this country to call for condoms or advice, but I walk around with crows jammed between my legs. I've never loved the same steak twice. My brother dances, and the song roams throats until it finds mine. In a dream, the algorithm broke the windows of It's Massachusetts. I'm a magnesium-deficient miracle who only shaves on Thursdays. He's got new Skechers. We make calligraphy with our shoes walking back from school. The rash of coffee shops in El Cajon. The dilapidated vaunts on Medford Street. I'm calling because California is kindling again, and he refuses medicine like I used to. I'm calling because we found the generic for Sudafed and it tasted green. I'm calling because I still bow my head in churches. My survival instinct is too strong. Well, thanks. That's my piece. I think we all have 5 minutes to talk, and so I suppose I can talk a little bit about my work and what brings me to writing. And also just praise again the NSPP program. I was selected as National Student Poet when I was 16, and I felt thoroughly and deeply unqualified to be a National Student Poet. I had submitted some of like my very first poems that I had ever written really in my whole life and got selected, and most of the people in my cohort were involved in art and writing or clubs around poetry, and so I felt like a huge fake and an imposter, which I'm sure many other subsequent NSPP selectees have felt in different ways. And I think my year of service not only allowed me to meet so many amazing, like, poets who, like, made their living off of poetry and engaged in poetry super deeply, but also taught me that my work mattered, my voice mattered, and that there were so many different ways to be a poet, whether that was being a poetry professor or working as a video game designer and publishing multiple books, or so many other things. I'm a law student right now. I think all of us have taken, and even just seeing our different cohorts take super different paths and continue working on our craft is, I think, really awesome. So yeah, I think this program was really powerful, and it helped me value my own voice and get to meet so many other poets like me, and that meant a lot. And I think today when I think about poetry, it's easy in the age of the genocide of Palestinians to feel that words are brittle, but I like to think that there's still room for a poetics of teeth, a poetics that serves as a resting place for people committed to struggle and to resistance. And so I like to think my work is working towards that, towards some poetics of teeth, and to serve as a testament for the loving math of aunties and loving hands that have made me possible and made my work possible. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of what's on my mind today. And yeah, I'm super happy to be in a space with so many other amazing national student poets. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Hi everyone. I'm David. I was a national student poet in 2015, and now I'm my final year in med school actually. So yeah, kind of to echo to Maya, like love learning about how all the alumni have gone on to various career paths. Um, and for me, I think poetry, kind of to echo a lot of what Maya said because she said it so beautifully. I think being a part of NSPP was, yeah, just a wonderful, like, continuing affirmation that, the words we write and the words we think, the words we say matter, regardless of what anyone tells us. And that as someone who went from being, like, very incredibly shy, who sat in the back of class and, like, never enjoyed speaking up to someone who has, like, taken opportunities to now try to, like, share my voice and share my work with others, especially with, like, a healthcare or medical humanities focus. Um, I think I'm very, very grateful for SPP and kind of that its mission of bringing art to and writing not just to us, but also to the communities that we serve. As I've gone through med school, I think one thing I think a lot about is how we can best communicate, because I think that's something I always struggle with in the hospital when talking with patients is how do I, how does a patient tell me what he or she or they are conveying, and am I receiving that correctly? And I feel like oftentimes poetry is, to me, has been like the most direct way of like translating my thoughts into someone else's head. And more recently, as I recently had the chance to rotate through a palliative care rotation where almost all my patients were at the end of life or near the end of life or dealing with chronic and terminal conditions. And that was something we talk a lot about as well with them is like as they're kind of nearing the end, um, what are things that they want to be transmitted? What are their hopes? What do they want their legacy to be remembered as? And so I'm going to share a poem today that kind of has been something that I've been reflecting on, especially at the end of life. It's called Comfort Measures Only. 1. On this bed for hours you lie while the crowds pass you. Some offer water, others pull the covers back over your yellow socks. Reminds you of your wife who is dead. You buried her 20 years ago, and grief does not become anything else, nor do you expect it to. At night, you talk with her while folding her warm, laundered clothes. Smooth her pillow, which was scrunched up the way she likes. 2. Someone shakes your arm and you wake up. You look over, and it is a young boy. He must have mistaken you for his father. You feel a violent wonder to teach him all he must know. Wrap your hand around his thin shoulder. It is probably the same with him. But he goes soon, and you wave goodbye. The moment is brief, and the longing only intensifies. A memory to bring home and share over the dinner table. 3. As the morphine sets in, you look around. The crowd has dwindled to a few. The boy is nowhere to be found. You try to speak, but noise is futile here. And the faces look deep in thought. You think about what flowers to surprise her with. Someone left a white orchid next to your coffee. Maybe that will come with you. It is drooping slightly. As the light dims, you think about things still to do. Buy paint for her canvases, vacuum dog fur out of the carpets, buy a nice vase for flowers. The list goes on and on. You will finish it later. Yeah, so that's it. And yeah, I guess I have a minute left, but I just want to say, yeah, like I think for me, writing has been an ongoing exploration and journey. I think is something that has been kind of evolved from like a personal hobby or passion to some like a way of viewing the world and observing the world and myself. And I hope to be able to continue writing even as a physician writer one day. So, yeah, thanks again.
I'm Darius. David and Maya, those are beautiful poems. Oh my gosh. Yeah. To try to actually I'm like changing my poem now as I listen to you guys. It was so lovely. And I want to read something that speaks to them. But yeah, my name's Darius. I was a 2018 National Student Poet. Yeah, and something I'm thinking about now is all these experiences that I had teaching workshops. And I haven't gotten to teach a workshop since NSPP, which is crazy. Or maybe I have. I don't know, but not as often. And one thing that was really, really gorgeous about those workshops and life-giving kind of was that I had decided at the time to teach workshops about grief, and then realized very quickly that I couldn't do it all year without some kind of respite, like, you know, the way that Maya was talking about poetry as respite. And I decided to then kind of shift and think about how to do that in a way that felt life affirming and joyful. And I was reading a lot of Ross Gay, who I mentioned in the chat is my favorite poet of all time, and started to teach about the concurrence of grief and joy in literature and the ways in which we can't feel one without the other, or the ways that our sorrows create kind of a joy. We're thinking also a lot about like ecstatic communion in a poetic space and how we can reconstitute voice. And it became basically a lifelong project. Coming from NSPP, I really found my voice there in that confluence. Yeah, so I think I want to read a poem that's really, really new, but is kind of representative of where my work is right now, which is writing. I've just been writing kind of straight love poems. And I've been writing a lot of ghazals, which interacts with my Persian heritage, but also I think are really interesting because you know, when you write a ghazal, the end of every couplet is the same word, and there's also a rhyme, which I don't do in this ghazal, so forgive me. But for this ghazal, I chose the word hope. And I think that what's really great is that at the end of the couplet, you get this recalibration and recommitment to the word that you chose. And I think choosing the word hope was kind of a nice thing for me as I wrote this poem. Okay, it's called Green Burial, Kokosing Nature Preserve. To live in hope is a beautiful thing, Dad says late one night, his hope living like a passerine bird carrying messages between us. My hope living within my fingers of late, and in every place I place them. Piano keys, the lake, your palm, a page of my journal, the slow slope of your lower back. Too often hope a thing with feathers that I release like doves into a future morning of finding you. Walking the green burial site with you across the land of the dead, blooming, our hands accidentally touch and burn with wanting, with waiting. I wonder if you notice my fingers, like the wildflowers you pick and plant in the field of your hair, each curl where I quietly wish to be wound, that nameless green of your body where I could bury myself and breathe in the plot of that good earth, planting the hope of my ear to your chest, the restful prairie, the algal bloom over the pond, the tree stretching its limbs above us like a canopy, only letting its arms rest from reaching when you wrap your own around its trunk. Your eyes closing the color of soil, where I plant my hope again and again. Somehow, it feels appropriate to stay alive here, to think there are countless lives to be lived, lives branching in parallel, lives past and present and buried. Let's find each other in the next one too, okay? You say, and I promise. Hope, feeling natural again on my tongue. After all, it can't be a coincidence, I tell you, all this beauty I see and say everywhere now. How the thought of a next life doesn't seem so terrible anymore. How terrific the urge to live in the hope of this life with you. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. I mean, first and foremost, what an honor it is to be here with so many incredible poets. Thank you all so much for your words. My name is Rosemary. I publish under the name Madeline Dietz, and I was the 2020 student poet representing the Midwest. And coming into NSPP, I was terrified of sharing my work. I couldn't imagine that my poetry had something to give the world at all. But now I can't imagine my life without sharing poetry and without hearing other people's poetry, and seeing what that kind of poem to poem communication can do. My service project was rooted in that. It involved creating and teaching poetry courses to elementary school students during the first waves of the pandemic to give young people the language to talk about what they were experiencing. And I think that's one of the biggest powers that NSPP gives high school students. It gives them the space to build their own poetic language before, embarking into college or life post academia, before setting off into the world and doing all these different pathways that NSPP kind of launches us out into. I am bringing in a piece that's a little bit different than my usual fare. So right now I'm working on a chapbook centered on the performance of lesbian gender and sexuality. There's a lot about food, there's a lot about God, and the only thread I'm really bringing through is that religious aspect. This poem started from a place of questioning how innovation under capitalism functions or fails more often. There is ample technology to aid humanity in weathering and even reversing the current climate crisis, from new methods of energy storage to indigenous knowledge that has been forcibly dislocated from the people's land. But so often short-term economic gain trumps long-term longevity for the globe, even in discussions of sustainability. So this is a frustration poem from that angle. This poem is titled God, or What You Call a God, after photographer Tom Higgins' Lithium series. Railway Technology magazine says the future of freight is battery, and it's painted cherry red. I ask about assault, and the article answers in lithium. Each 2.4 megawatt per hour FLX drive locomotive stuffed and stuck like a pig, 500 battery packs, 36 battery cells per pack, 18,000 units crammed into a hulking body that represents 300 million tons of carbon dioxide out of lungs. But which lungs? Tokenau lays like a watercolor palette, all teals and goldenrod, salt in air and salt on tongues. But Daddy wants electric cars and a pat on the brosaded back. Daddy wants cobalt. Daddy says fuck you and your rainwater collection barrels and cacerolazos. That girl you loved steps out again onto her balcony in Santiago to bang pots with a spoon, praying. She says it's like living in God's belly, as in whale father, as in market, but God lives in that 2-inch gap just before the oncoming fight train. Throw more Lincolns in there. Tie more people to the tracks until it's somebody else's problem. Try to touch divinity, run weeping out into the snow in mama's bathrobe, gawky-limbed and red-hot, buzzing with that anti-life called hearty names like drive, determination. God, does everybody's head want splitting? Run weeping. The diesel train that shakes your home to the roots charges past like so many horses, screaming at children in dead gardens, marking its territory with noise and oil piss. Throw the brakes. Talk about something worth living for. Talk about iron flow batteries, redox reactions of electrolytes exchanging over a membrane like future generations playing Red Rover, hands joined, zero degradation, deep cycle charge and discharge cycles, intake, release, recycled future breaths. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is R.C. Davis, and I was the National Student Poet of the Midwest in 2021. Yeah, I think something that the National Student Poets program really taught me, and sort of the sort of workshops I've been lucky to lead since then, is that I don't know, I think I primarily see poetry now more than ever as sort of a way to I think poetry can sort of build community and sort of create like connection between people in such a unique way. Even like between my friends, we're always sending each other poems. And that sort of every time I read a poem by a friend, it always sort of reveals something new about them. This is a poem that I wrote. This is a poem I wrote like a year ago. And but as soon as sort of I heard the prompt for this workshop, I knew that this was the one I wanted to share. Because because I've been thinking a lot about sort of the rise in transphobia and kind of just current, like just sort of continuous onslaught of new sort of anti-trans laws. And I realized, and I think I kind of got at this poem, is that like I'm not going to be able to sort of effectively resist anything if I can't first trust myself and understand that how I see myself and what is authentic to me is the most important thing. So I think I do have to start with self-love and self-acceptance. All right. This poem is called Sun Sonnets, but it's really just, one 3-part poem, I guess. Sun Sonnets 1. My third grade friend has a Lorax themed party, and I don't want to take off that yellow fake mustache. I read a book about a boy who used to be a girl, and I try to make myself wear dresses for the month to stop the itching. I scratch the birthmark off my palm. Even then, I'm aware of symbolism. I first tell people at 14. I read articles to justify, to clarify my stance on my contents. After years of twisting that gets boring to talk about, I stand still, cupping my hands in the cold to catch the sunlight. I eat an orange. I buy a vest with buttons. I text grandma on her birthday. I believe in God for a few months, then a vague notion of love. I write some poems and make an appointment. I try to stop worrying about what's rational. 2. I have a picture on my phone of me at 8. Bad skateboarder in plaid shorts who sang Les Mis songs with her sister. Transition can't be rebirth because no part of me ever ended. Is it enough to say I just grew up? I'm no farther from my child self than anyone is really. Behind my grin, a gap-toothed kid collects petals to fuel a time machine. Mom went to college 2 states from home, despite my grandma's worry. I bike to the pharmacy to get my tea prescription while listening to the same Indigo Girls album she played for me as a baby. Aunt Robin sends me poems she wrote at 75. I have a dream where I wear my great-grandma's butterfly pin and chase a grackle. 3. Today, I rub my upper lip and gauge the thickness of its hair. This lack of ease is not a matter of true versus false. It's not that I never saw myself as a girl, or at least alongside girls. We peeled bark off backyard sticks, collected fossils on our dressers. I'm sick of stories and definitions. I'm far more interested in the shock of wind against my teeth, the galloping sun this November. It's easy to reject the gaps that only a poem can fill. I finish my philosophy paper at midnight and dream of a perfect moral system. Today, I'm trying to know myself like I know a catchy song. I put the geode back together. I want to be a man who's like my mother. All right. Thanks. And thanks for sharing your work, everyone. It's been amazing to hear.
That was all of those were so good. Oh my god. Thank you all so much for bringing those poems. So I'm going to throw a couple questions out there for the group. It's really like, yeah, just unmute yourself and talk. It's obviously harder to gauge the vibes on Zoom than in real life, but we will try. And then in a few minutes, we'll open it up to audience members as well. So we're just gonna get started real quick, and then people can drop questions in the chat, and we will very soon transition from my questions to other people's questions. So think about what you're interested in hearing from these lovely poets. So this is something that a lot of you touched on in your introductions, or like just when you were talking. And something that I especially think is very important, like Maya said, in the context of what's happening in Palestine. How can poetry not only help us envision a just world, but help us get closer to that world? So, like you guys were saying, a lot of the time it's easy to see poetry as frivolous or elitist or just something that's, I mean, like, and I'm very guilty of this myself. I generally think of poetry as a very like siloed thing as far as like artistic pursuits go, but like there is such a like, it's so rooted in interconnection. And so I guess, yeah, I'm wondering about how you guys, I mean, I don't want to say counter because that makes it sound like poetry is frivolous, but like what, yeah, material good things that poetry does. I think, yeah, like there's a lot of poetry that's coming out of Palestine right now. I've been reading a lot of Masab Abu Toha this past year. Yeah, just sort of like testimonials, how we can think about those, and sort of also like the politics of being a poet and being an American poet right now. There's a lot of talk about like poet washing, and like for example, like poet laureate working with NASA, like thinking about the ethics of that. Like, what does that mean for poets, American poets, non-Americans, non-poets, everybody. So I will stop yapping now, but I would love to hear what you guys think about any of that.
I'm happy to start. I feel like I feel an especially pressing responsibility as an Arab American living in the imperial court to like write beyond. It sucks that my people and the majority of my homeland regions are constantly being exploited and bombed for oil and other things. And I think that is important. And then also, what can we do to move forward from grief? Because I think as American writers, yes, we're allowed to grieve and we should be angry, but we need to be working towards making our rage and winnowing our rage into something of use. I think finishing at grief is almost lazy and a little bit self-centered. But that's my personal politics. I'm curious what other poets think.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was very well said.
There's also like so much joy to be found in reading other people's poetry, as you mentioned, Maria. Like one thing poetry groups in my area are doing is every single reading we read Palestinian poets along with our own poetry, like making sure there is space in the conversation for poetry outside of just American poets, like refusing to allow that quieting and that lessening to happen. But I do think there is a tendency to maybe not ignore joyous poetry, but kind of sidestep it sometimes because of what Maya was mentioning. Like, there is rage right at the surface, and that should be discussed and that should be like reached for. But then to discuss whole groups of people only in terms of rage or only in terms of grief is incredibly dehumanizing. And it is not acceptable to stay just in those emotions when there is a whole like phenomenological experience, a whole broad range of human life that should be discussed. And I think both reading and writing poetry about love, poetry about connection, poetry about families is one of the most like soul enriching and connective experiences you can have. And what a privilege and joy it is to be able to do that, especially now with like the internet and folks in Gaza using eSIMs to like send out their work. We can like connect with people across the globe, and that is just such a privilege to be able to do.
Thank you so much. That was very eloquently said. Yeah, that's something that I that I noticed people doing in the past year, and that I eventually started doing too. Was whenever I read, I open with a poem by a Palestinian poet. I think that I don't know. It feels like what a land acknowledgement is supposed to do to me. I don't know, like, because there's just no way to make that not feel redundant. But like, you know, spotlighting words that aren't your own is like is more important now than ever. I feel like. Yeah. If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. I have one or two more questions that I can pose, but I would also love to hear from people who are not me. So if anybody else has any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Okay, so my next question, and this is of course because of the theme of this, I'm especially interested in like poets who write towards liberation, but I guess also just this can be a more general question as well. Like we talked a little bit about at the beginning of the panel about our favorite poets, and something that I like thinking about a lot is sort of like poetic ancestry, poetic lineage, like seeing other people's work in your own, like, and so I was sort of just wondering which poets you all consider to be your poetic ancestors, and how you see their work influencing yours, and also just like um in general poets who have either completely shattered or clarified your worldview.
I have quite a few. I think that they're, um, yeah, I think a lot about poetic lineage. Something my grandma called me recently, my BB, who shows up. Well, even non-poets, because I would say my BB is like a huge inspiration to me. Um, Although she might call herself a poet, she says, "You write poems, I speak them." So that's another thing. But I yeah, I think a lot about, she said about a poem that wasn't even about like, didn't mention my Persian ancestry at all, and there's this kind of, um I feel like in my life, I've had this, misconception that I need to mention that I'm Persian all the time in order to, like, be it, and, my baby was like about this poem that came out recently, she was like, "I feel Rumi, like, just coursing through this poem." And I was like, "All right, yeah, that's awesome." I'm just like Rumi, Vivi, absolutely. But I do think that like what's so incredible, like Rumi has this quote, that is, it's like, "Now that my life has passed, my hope will outlive me." And I think that there's this real lastingness, to poetry, to even poetry from the 12th century, being able to speak to us now. Um, and I love this idea of poetic lineage as, um, something that kind of ripples across time, and courses through us. We thought about like one of my old poetry instructors used to talk about images that exist in us, sort of like a generational trauma or like generational images that like just exist in your body and like that you experience viscerally, and that sometimes enters your work. I think I'm not like I don't have like scientific basis for this, but I think it's true. David may be able to speak more scientifically to that. But yeah, no, I've Rumi, more recent poets that I feel like I speak to a lot in my work are like Ross Gay, Araceli Girmay. Um, mm, there are a lot more. Kaveh Akbar, of course, like just he is important to me in talking about my ancestry and heritage. And yeah, I'll let other people talk.
No, Ross Gay is one for me too. I read Sam Sachs for the first time like when I was like 16, and I think that like permanently rewired my poetic brain. I just like no, I Madness like changed my life. That book just like yeah, I think changed the entire way I think about sort of approaching writing poetry. Just sort of the all the worlds that they like traverse in this one in a one poem. And yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I think also like Ross Gay and sort of I remember I don't actually remember this interview this is from, but I remember sort of him talking about sort of, you know, phrases like sort of phrases about like joy as resistance, talking about like we have to remember that the joy comes first. That's more fundamental and human. And that's like what that's the thing we live for. It isn't just sort of as this resistance to forces. And I feel like I think forces of oppression. And I think about that sort of a lot. I guess, yeah, I don't know, in the context of like, yeah, thinking about yeah, dude, I don't know what I'm saying. Thinking about like no, yeah, in the ways I write about like my trans experience and like queerness, it's like yeah, I don't know. I try to have that sort of joy and authenticity come first. And I think there's something to that, at least for me and how I see it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, similarly, like to echo everyone else, I think some of my favorite poets like Merwin, huge one, Dennis Johnson, Larry Levis. I feel like I also feel like there's like more so like um in addition to like what they write about and like their subject matter and how they like their pacing and stuff, I almost feel like the images kind of they have or like the even like the structure or like the shape of things somehow like bleed over and like I feel like there's also a lot to be said for like space and like the white space and like how things are structured. Like I remember in college I was like addicted to like experimenting with like different ways of like putting the words on the page and like just trying out different things and how it would look. Um, I feel like that's something I always think back to as well. In terms of like lineage, is like it like sometimes when I'm like, oh, this seems new, and I realize, oh, like, I think everything has been done before. And I think that's like it's inspiring and it's also like humbling, and I think it's like a great reminder for me at least that like we're all kind of just exploring and um figuring things out, but also that we do there is like a rich history and there is a like these all these voices and different ways of writing to fall back on.
Thank you so much. All of these have been so lovely, and I'm like absorbing so much knowledge just from listening to you guys talk. I'll leave like a little awkward bit of silence for anyone else who wants to talk about this, and then again would love to pose some audience questions to the poets, and we do have a writing prompt that we would love to share with you all should we have time. So think about any questions you might have, and then we'll do a little writing.
Poets have been stunning. I really have been loving the work and so inspired that a group of poets so young has so much to say so confidently. So thank you. I have two questions actually. So one is for Maya because the title of this event actually came from her suggestion. It's from a Mahmoud Darwish poem. And you talked a little bit about the poetics of teeth, and I'm curious how you might define that or what a poetics of teeth can do. And then for all of our panelists, I'm interested in what you did for your community service projects when you were with the National Student Poets Program.
Both great questions. I guess to start with the first, like, I think a poetics of teeth necessarily have to be materially committed to struggle. What that means for me is like this past year and a half, I've donated all the proceeds from any workshops and readings that I've done straight to GoFundMe's for Palestine because although I'm not rich by any means, I'm comfortable and I don't need to be more comfortable when other people are, dying. And another part of it is also taking personal risks in both my artistic and professional careers. I've seen the like student encampments and really the students' revolution in the past year has been so inspiring for me as someone who was raised in a pretty careerist mindset and respectability politics, model minority dialogues, et cetera, et cetera. This year I'm working on a second full length collection, and I pulled it out of it won a poetry book contest with the press, and the first question I asked them when I met with the press was, why don't you guys have a statement on Palestine on your website? It's kind of interesting to me. We ended up having a whole 1 hour conversation. I explained, especially again, as an Arab American poet, I feel like I can't offer my work to spaces or organizations that don't have, at the very least, a bare bones statement about Palestine and their standing on it, especially because art and so many of the dialogues of poetry are rooted in this idea that, like, we're bringing in diverse voices, we're supporting dialogue, okay, but no dialogue at the expense of my life, and no voices or conversations questioning the validity of Arab life. I refuse it. And so yeah, that's been declining events, pulling my book out of 2 book contracts with prestigious presses because I didn't agree with it, and obviously I want my book to be published, but not at that cost. And I mean, I take these risks as someone who doesn't have an agent, someone in a very early stage of my career, but I think it's paid off for me emotionally and morally. And also, even as I think I'm able to afford taking risks like that in my artistic life because it isn't my day job. But even in the law school setting, whether that means organizing with the MENA Law Student Association, wearing my keffiyeh to school in a setting where UCLA is actively litigating 2 different lawsuits against students for organizing for Palestine. We're currently going through a whole nother worker strike. All this to say, poetry with teeth has to involve risk, at least the way I see it. Sorry, that was really long. But the thing I did for my 2016 project, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with It's Golly, which was I'm from San Diego, which was a local San Diego organization working with primarily Latino and African immigrants and helping them, especially like the first and second generation children of those immigrants in like getting classroom materials and different kind of educational artistic programming. And so my project centered around leading 10, 11 workshops with them over the summer of 2016 or 17. I don't remember now. But we worked on developing, just like getting them comfortable talking about their lives and their stories, because who's going to tell their stories if not them? And we got to end the summer with like a really lovely showcase in the local theater. And it was just awesome to like see the kiddies like feel confident about themselves and feel that their voice mattered.
Can go briefly. My service project back in 2015 was I really wanted to work with veterans, and like children of military families, and so I traveled throughout rural Oklahoma for like a week, with someone from NSPP and taught at like primarily like public schools in the area that like primarily served like children of the military families at they were like a nearby base.
I already talked a little tiny bit about mine, so I'll be super brief. But because I was in the 2020 year, everything was online. All of our NSPP meets were online. Like, we didn't do any in-person events or readings. So I worked with elementary school students specifically, talking with them about the pandemic and talking them through Zoom fatigue, like checking in emotionally with them. It was a lot more like interpersonal kind of therapy work than it was just a straight poetry workshop. And it was incredible. Like, all the kids were so engaged, like far more engaged than I could have ever asked them to be, especially given that they had been on Zoom for like 8+ hours each day before coming to my class. But it was just incredible to be able to kind of give a little space of respite amongst everything that was going on. So great experience, even online.
Yeah. So for my NSPP project, I planned to sort of host workshops for teens sort of at like in the Chicago area, sort of talking about like mental health and sort of getting that emotional connection with poetry, and sort of sharing it in a group. I did sort of have to like basically I went on medical leave from being national student poet. I wasn't able to end up doing that project, but I've done a lot of yeah, but since then, I've had a lot of opportunities to sort of lead workshops with high schoolers. Last winter, I went back to my old high school and basically like taught poetry workshops with the kids for a month, and like that type of community building and sort of showing like what writing, I feel like sharing your writing can sort of really help people connect and have confidence and understand themselves and understand other people, which I think these are just very fundamental things. So yeah.
I for my sorry. I was a 2018 poet. So in 2018 I was really passionate about grief. My mom and my brother died when I was little, when I was 3 years old, and in a car accident. And I was really interested in raising awareness about children's grief, because it doesn't. There's this great moment in the book Martyr by Kaveh Akbar where he like turns 13 and then he's like walking around cutting class, and then all of a sudden the grief of his losing his mother young like hits him, and he like feels the weight and immensity of that grief, that 13 years of that grief, like just in one moment. And I actually think that's really true to coming of age in grief and through grief, if you were born into it, as I was. And I think that's what the first time I went to a therapist, they were like, seems like a perfectly happy kid. So it's just like, really important to me to reach out to those, to that community. But it was difficult to kind of figure out a way into doing that because it's pretty broad. So I went to Salt Lake City and went to the NACG conference, which is the National Alliance for Children's Grief. And I talked to grief educators, therapists, and sort of, it was like a transmission of kind of how to talk and write about grief with kids. So I taught them a workshop that they could use, and I did that for 3 days. It was really fun and meaningful.
I think that was everyone, wasn't it? Sweet, thank you.
But I saw one last question in the chat. And so if you don't mind, like a lightning round, Abigail asks, I would love to know who first inspired you to write.
That would be for me, my mother, who is also a writer, but for middle grade fiction. So she was kind enough to write down my little stories when I was too young to know how to write.
For me, I'll say Atal Adnan. Her book, especially the Arab Apocalypse, meant a lot to me. She does these amazing experiments with like form and symbology.
For me, it was probably my freshman English teacher in high school.
Both my parents are poets and professors, and so is my birth mom, who died when I was little. So it became a way of talking to her in my work. And then for a writer, it was Mark Doty. I went to one of I wrote him a letter because I loved him so much when I was little, and then I went to one of his readings, and he dedicated a poem to me about a golden retriever on stage. And it was like the greatest moment of my life, and I was like, I want to be a writer. So
I think I wrote stories a lot as a kid, but I think with poetry, it was sort of my my high school English teacher. My high school had sort of a big like spoken word poetry club, and this teacher like we visited all the English classes, came to my class, was like, you have to join, and then I've been a poet ever since. So that's basically it. Yeah.
Maya came up with this super cool prompt, and that I think it'll be really fruitful. It was very cool for me to just like read and think about. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to all the panelists for all your wonderful words. You all are so eloquent, and it was so great to like hear your work and hear what you've been up to, and hear about how the program shaped what you're up to now, and how you're taking that forward into the world. So I am very grateful for this as well. Thank you so much. It's such a cool thing to do, and I'm just really excited that we all got to do this together. So thank you so much.